The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Yeah, hello. So I think you heard most of what I was saying there. I just forgot to start the actual broadcast, but I think you were able to hear most of what I was saying before. We're going to look at the Brownfield register, and I think most of the people that are in the web conference today are sort of existing clients. What we'll try and do, I think, because I'd like to make this as much as a sort of a discussion forum as much as anything. You know, where it's a new thing that that the government's requiring, and you know, so there's different ways of approaching it. So it'd be interesting to hear your views. So what I'll do is, first of all, if that's okay, go through a PowerPoint just to introduce ourselves to those of you who are in the conference that have not sort of heard of us or come across what we do, and then sort of show the software, and then go through, maybe unmute you all and allow a bit of discussion. That may happen sort of during the actual demonstration as well. So so I think, as I say, it's all going to be a fairly fluid affair. So what I'll do first of all is start sharing my screen. So I think you should all be viewing my screen. And as I say, I'll start off with a quick PowerPoint. So using GeoEnviron, which is our data management system, as your Brownfield register, that's the theme of this webinar. So quick overview of the presentation: who are we, what is GeoEnviron, and why we think it's the right system. We're STM Environmental. I represent STM Environmental. My name's Simon McConey. I'm an environmental engineer, but my background goes back to, I started my career in local government as a pollution control officer, so I did that for 10 years. STM Environmental has now been sort of in existence for almost 15 years, during which time we've built up a good client base of local authorities using our software. We work with a Danish company primarily called GeoCon, who basically based in Copenhagen, and have done very well in Denmark, with 95% of all the local authorities using this system, the GeoEnviron system, and it's also being used by the Environmental Protection Agency over there, as well as the Ministry of Defence for managing all the sort of data related to environment on their sites. So, you know, we've also got implementations of the software in other parts of the world, as you can see, Lithuania, Spain, Malaysia, where there's national implementations. So we're talking about a tried and tested system. It's not something that we've just sort of kind of cobbled up recently. It's been in existence for over 25 years, and it's been relied upon by many local governments across the world. So it is a very tried and tested system. In the UK, excuse me, as I say, we've got 85 local authorities that are using our system mainly for contaminated land purposes, for managing their contaminated land data. Those of you who aren't contaminated land officers, just to give you a bit of background, the government introduced legislation known as Part 2A, Environmental Protection Act, which requires local authorities to essentially inspect their areas for the purposes of identifying contaminated land. Now that, you know, it essentially means developing information systems that that hold data on contamination, and essentially developing a brownfield register of industrial land. Hence, obviously, the link between the Part 2A Brownfield Register and the Brownfield Development Register that you're being asked to develop now. Obvious links there. So as I say, of those, most of those 85 local authorities are on our contaminated land management system. We've also got a flood risk management system, as well as environmental permits and other modules which authorities use as well. So essentially managing all the environmental data. As I mentioned earlier, the system's been around for quite a while. Began development in 1994, so it's been around for quite a while. We're essentially looking at a Microsoft SQL Server database. So it's a tried and tested, it's a tried and tested technology. It's not Access or any of those sort of kind of amateur solutions. This is a multi-user, multi-access SQL server. Most of the local authorities, most of our clients use Microsoft SQL Server, so that can easily bolt into your existing kind of infrastructure. We also integrate, so the system integrates into ArcGIS and MapInfo and various other GIS systems. So essentially, you've got a database which you can then link into your GIS, and obviously that's critical for your Brownfield register to be able to see where things are. We're fairly unique in the sense that we integrate to lots of different GIS systems, and that's done because we wanted to be able to roll out our system to whoever was using, whoever needed it, and we didn't want the GIS to be a limitation. So we're currently looking at things like QGIS and linking into that. So that's not on the list if you happen to use that, but it's hopefully going to be coming in the future. We've got another little application called MapEagle, which I won't be demonstrating today, but really sort of neat little application that allows you to use the data, using the data in your GIS, create reports, which we you can then sell to the public or use for internal purposes. We also have web solutions which we can sort of use to display data from the database to the public. Essentially, once you've compiled your Brownfield registers and you've got everything up and running, and you want to actually, as opposed to kind of doing an export and uploading that onto your websites, you can actually directly upload the data to your websites from the database, and that gives you, the web applications give you control over what information. You don't obviously necessarily have to show everything that's in the database. You can choose the fields that you want to share, and then those get published live as you're updating things. So why GeoEnviron? We're talking about developing an information system, and you're starting on that journey with your Brownfield registers. Obviously, the contaminated land officers have been doing this for quite a while, and that's why we're urging any planners to talk to their contaminated land officers, because they already have that information system built up. So it's a matter of plugging into that and moving forward rather than reinventing the wheel. So we're talking about developing a fast and efficient information management system, improving the way you're dealing with requests, and essentially improving access to information about brownfield sites which are ready for development. We talk to developers a lot because we do work for developers as well as working with local authorities. We do private consultancy, and many developers sort of say to us, the major problem is finding development land. So I think this initiative is a really good initiative, but yeah, it does need to be backed up with sufficient resources and systems. So as I mentioned before, we're talking about a client server-based system. So the fact that it uses Microsoft SQL Server means you can sort of network the application to an unlimited number of users, and obviously that's a major benefit, a major advantage over using something like a desktop sort of single user-based system like Access or similar. An Excel spreadsheet, might be something that you might want to look at, but you're obviously going to be limited in that because it's going to be available only to yourself, basically. And the options of sending that data onto a website become limited. You can obviously still do that, but work is involved in exporting information and so on and so forth. Okay, it's a system that's easy to use. So once you've got the system and it's all installed and set up, it's easy to use. We work continuously on improving the system and making it more user-friendly. A lot of that improvement is user-driven. So we have user group meetings where people come back and feed back to us in terms of what they want to see for the next versions, etc. We've got an ongoing support and development service. So as part of that, it's the user group meetings that I just mentioned. But as well as that, we're available as a sort of online help, telephone help as well. So whenever you've got any issues, we're available sort of to help you solve them. And that's quite an important point when you're buying in software from if you're thinking about buying in software from a supplier. We do have that track record now of 15 years of working with local government, and that we've built up a system. Well, not we understand IT departments and how they work, as well as how that interfaces with planning and environmental departments. So all of that is of benefit. We're trying to build relationships with our clients as well as software. So as I say, most of our clients have been with us since we started, so over a 15-year period. So proud to say that we've not lost many clients over that period. And where we have lost them, it's been due to mainly budgetary constraints and that kind of thing. So yeah, we work really hard at that. So why GeoEnviron again? So we're talking about, I've mentioned a couple of these things already, documents, sort of managing all the different disparate documents and photos and bits of information you need, bringing all that together essentially, multi-user, web enablement. And then if you get specifically into the Brownfield register itself, so we've got a good data management system. What kind of data do we need to manage? The DEFRA guidance sort of gives you an idea of all the information the key information or the minimum information that you need to collect. So it's things like keeping a track of key deadlines. You need to be able to tag sites, as, with various bits of information, windfall sites, etc. Whether they're part 1 or part 2A of a register, who they're owned by, the minimum number of dwellings that you'd expect to be built onto the site, and so on and so forth. So I will now switch over into the application. But before I do that, I'll bring up this guidance document, and it's basically the Brownfield Register Data Standard, preparing and publishing a register. So if you haven't seen that, I'd advise you to download that, and it basically comes up with a template, a minimum for what you need to, well, it's actually what you need to deliver at the end of the year to the government, and so it's got all the fields that you need to collect information on. So that's a good starting point for building the register. But I would suggest that it is just a starting point. The information that you give over to DEFRA is just key information. You're going to be collecting much more information than just those fields. Okay. So first of all, I'll give you a brief sort of, for those of you who've got the system, you know about the system. I'll just, obviously you're aware of how it works, but for those of you that don't, I'll just give you a brief idea of where we are at with the system at the moment. So this is the database that I've got set up on your screens. We have different modules, as I mentioned. So if I just go back and give you an idea of the contaminated land system that we've developed. So this is the system that's sort of, been in development for well over 14 years now, 15 years, which contaminated land officers use. Now this is just a demonstration database, so please ignore all the data. It's just purely for demonstration purposes. If I just do a find and retrieve here, so this retrieves all the data, all the information on all the sites that I've got recorded in my database. So I'm sure, if you're a planner in this webinar and you're wondering how to get started, your contaminated land officer, your environmental protection department should already have a list of sort of brownfields. They may well be only sort of former industrial uses, but it's a good starting point. To be brownfield sites which have not been industrial, which would also need to be added to the register. But getting at least getting a list of brownfields that have been are industrial would be a good start. So what our contaminated land management system allows officers to do is essentially, I'll just bring up a demonstration site that I like to use. So Bellham's Metalworks. So we've got a few photos attached to Bellham's Metalworks, and I can, so this is probably how it looks now after a site investigation, etc. So that all this information will have been collated for existing brownfield developments, but obviously a lot of sites won't have been developed. A lot of the sites on the register in parts of the country won't have been developed. So what we're seeing here is information about the site in the top screen. So the location, it's the site ID, postcodes, etc., and various tags, information tags, planning status, remediation status, etc. So it gives us key information already about the site. So that's what we call the registration casement. And then if we move down into the information casement, so all of these tabs basically contain information about this site, and including the history of the site. So we've got this was an electroplating works previously, or in a garage, and the glass ceramics. So we can record all the different industrial uses of the site. And from that, the contaminated land officers will be able to prioritize sites for inspection using the prioritization system that's built in. They will be able to sort of, log information as sites come through the planning process, get developed, get remediated. All of that information can be logged in here, as you saw, photographs, site investigation information, all the documents and reports associated with any cleanup can be logged in here, and obviously that again, for the brownfield register, obviously the contaminated land officers are going to be a very key part of that, because as those sites go onto the register, they get picked up by developers, they get developed, inevitably contaminated land officers going to be involved, and that information then needs to be fed into the Part 2A side of things, so that the site gets reprioritized, and hopefully then essentially the marketing process doesn't get held up by the likes of environmental search reports that fail the site. And our system is, so it allows you to do all of this, but it's also GIS enabled. So what I've brought up there is the GIS. So we have the options of plotting sites, and sorry, bear with me. I'll just need to just check that this has been set up correctly. Let's have a look. Okay, I've got it set up to link to a different GIS than the one I've got open here. So I'll just, if you can just bear with me there. As I mentioned, we do link to a number of different GIS systems. But if we start from here, potential contaminated land. So let's say I'm looking at this site here, and I want to view that information in the database. So I can basically just open it up, and so that brings up my record in the database. I'll just do that again. So from the GIS, you can then at any point sort of select a site. And yeah, sorry, these polygons are a bit messy, but it is, as I say, just demonstration data. And what it shows is essentially, planning applications. The red polygons are potential contaminated land sites. We've got storage tanks and samples, and all of this information can be managed within our contaminated land system. And in the same way that you can plot contaminated sites, planning out, you can also plot brownfield register sites, and I'll show you that in a second. So as you can see there, so it's a visualization of the information is a key part of what we do. And just as I did earlier, I clicked on a record in the map, and it brought up the record in the database. I can go to the database, retrieve a record, and that will automatically be centered and displayed on the map. So that just, it's a nice little feature that just makes it very easy and quick for you to be able to view information in your GIS. Okay, so let's just get back to the Brownfield register. So what I'll do is just is introduce you to what we call the case management, which would be what we consider to be your Brownfield register. So essentially, this is the module, and if you just run through the process of adding a site to this module, a Brownfield register site. So you create an ID. So one of the first things that you need to do is have an ID. Sorry, hang on. Just move back up here. I was just going to run through the different fields that you're required to put together. So site reference is one of them. So the system generates the site reference as part of the process. So we're going for a Brownfield register site here. Okay, so so that becomes my site reference, and I can call my site. I can give the site a name. And again, if we come back over here, that's one of the other fields that you need. You need the site name and address. Okay, so in here we might call it, we'll just call it Brownfield register site number 2. And here I might, if I've got an address, you can import your gazetteer into the system, and you can use that to to sort of populate the addressing in information into the system. It's a fairly straightforward stuff there. So we've got a site set up. It's a Brownfield register site. You know, you can sort of tag these fields in they're very customizable. And if we move down the data standard there, we see that that one of the other fields that we need is organization, the name of the organization. So obviously, you know, this field will be always the name of your council. So so it might not be necessary, but if you are maybe doing the work for several councils, compiling data for several councils, that would be useful to be able to input the information there. And then if we move down again, we've got ownership is one of the ownership status, which is who owns the site. So we've got a field here. And just to explain how customizable these fields are, I can double click here and it takes me back into the base table, and I have a number of fields here. I'm just going to remove some of these options that have come up, but essentially you can create the list that pops up in the base table yourselves. So I've gone in there and I've created this list here. So I'll say it's a local authority owned site. Okay, and so we're sort of slowly filling out all the required information. And then if we move across again, we've got planning status and deliverability. We come back. So what's the planning status? So I've got some options that I've set up here, and let's say it's been permissioned. Is it deliverable? Yes or no? So all of the fields that you need, what kind of permission has it got? Let's say outline planning permission. Is it a part 1 or a part 2 register site? So we say part 1 there. Okay, so so most of the information that you need to be collecting as part of this data standard that's required we've already filled that in, and we're just getting started. So some of this other information, things like minimum dwellings, number of houses you're expecting to put on the site, and notes, etc. We have an unlimited number of custom fields that you can create within the system. So here you can just go in and say, well, okay, description of the housing development expected to be social housing or whatever. And you know, you can tag in as many, so net number of dwellings, and this is the number of dwellings you expect to be put onto the site. So you might say 200 dwellings expected onto the site. When was the permission date granted? And here you've got the option. You can put in a date here and sort of say, well, it was the 1st of the 1st, 2017. Or you can, if you want, to use some of the more detailed functionality that we have. So under case details here, we can create a permission case, for example. So in here, I can go in and say, well, I want to look at this site as part of an outline planning permission, possibly. Who's dealing with it? And go through the motions of whatever you need to do to get that permission through. And the system includes a sort of a raft of functionality that would allow you to create procedures for how you want to deal with planning applications. So here, for example, you can if you need to consult and do other things, you can create a task list of things that need to be done, and you can sort of ensure that that task list is followed as part of the process. So once your planning permission is granted, you can then log that as an event. So so if we go down here, planning permission granted, Okay. And sorry, STM, I think I need to put in there. And who, the case officer that did it. And you've got lots of other options in terms of what information you can record. But there's another tag for the date that outline planning permission was granted. And within this case, you might want to include, information, the decision notice, for example. And so let's say we've got a decision notice which we want to copy onto one of the features with the system. It allows you to do things like dragging and dropping data onto it. So if we go in here, GeoEnviron demos, I've got some example documents here. So let's say I've got some reports and things that I need to attach to the site. So I've just dragged that remediation statement onto the site. So that's gone in there. And so anyone can come along and view these documents. So even if you've got a number of documents, you can drag them on. So let's say I want to attach these 4 documents to my database. I can, oops, struggling here because I've only got one screen, but let's see if I can do it. So I'm just going to drag those documents onto there. So you can see now there's 5 pages of documents, which I can then go in and update. Okay. So I've got all of those documents associated with this planning application. And one of the other things that the Brownfield Register asks you to do is to put in links to the planning website. So you need a site plan, a site history URL, I think it is somewhere. But yeah, you can link to websites as well. So if you've, oops, clicked on the wrong thing there. So if you want to link in a website, so you can go in there and just say, I want to link to a website for this, and it's the planning history link. And then what I need to do is just copy my website wherever it happens to be. Just for demonstration purposes, I'll put in the URL to our website in here. So that goes in there. Update that. So then clicking that button will open that website. So you can have as many websites, as many documents, as many links as you want associated with a case. So hopefully you're getting the idea that there's pretty much nothing you can't do with the system. It's just really a matter of how you want to configure it. In terms of if you've got long, detailed statements or notes, observations and things like that you want to put in, you're able to do that. Maybe, discussions, telephone discussions that you've had. There's unlimited fields where you can type away to your heart's content. And this is all, I'll just take you back to the PowerPoint where we were talking about eventually your Brownfield Register should be really online. So all the information that people want to be able to view in order to make a decision about whether to purchase a plot or not should be available online. And so this is what you're doing here is essentially creating the basis for that. So our web applications, you would be able to take any information that you've collated in here and publish it to a website. Okay, so once we've kind of accumulated all the information, linked all our documents, photographs I've got to show, just quickly show you how you can drag and drop photos onto a site. So let's say you've got a ripe development site there and you want to maybe attach those photos to your record. So there we go. We've got some site photos there. So it's easy as that. And so whenever we bring up this site, you'll be able to click the button and it will show you the photos that you've got for that site. So the other thing I want to show then is just how you get this mapped onto your GIS. So I'm showing ArcGIS, which is a one of the systems that we support, the principle for all the GIS systems is the same. We add in functions that allow you GIS basically to talk to the database. So in ArcGIS, what we've done, we've added in an extension, and so you've got the full functionality of ArcGIS. We're not diluting that at all, but you can, you've got the added ability to plot information from the database. So I'm just looking for a good space to draw a polygon. So let's say I want to draw my Brownfield register site, and so I've got a Brownfield register layer that I've created. And there's facilities in the system that allow you to create different kinds of layers from your database. So in the same way that, so I've created like the contamination layers and all the other layers, I've created a Brownfield site register layer. So so I might actually just to make it a bit more interesting, what I'll do here is that's probably runway 4 then, is now going to be developed as housing. That wouldn't surprise me. But what we've got, let's say this site is a potential contaminated land site, but we're going to develop it as a Brownfield register site. We're going to put it into our Brownfield register as ripe for development. So I could maybe plot the same boundary. It's maybe just interesting just to show the crossover between the Brownfield register and the potential contaminated land register. So in there, I've plotted the boundary, and I then link my newly created record in the database to that boundary. So I go link selected. So that basically links that polygon to the Brownfield site number 2. And you can see the coordinates of that polygon are imported into the database. So that fulfills one of your other requirements of the data standard, which is you need the coordinate reference system and you need the XY coordinates. You also need the size or the area, and the system automatically updates the area for you in there. So that's in square meters. So when you draw your polygon, it automatically updates the area of the polygon. And the reason I did that over that site is that I can also now say, well, okay, I've got a Brownfield register site, but I've got previous information, which is this site in my contaminated land register. So if you're a planning officer and you're sharing the database, you're using the same database as a contaminated land officer, you would be able to link your Brownfield register site back to the contaminated land site. So if we go in here, we say there's a tab called related sites, and then we can link those two sites together. So I think it's CL 0211, which I believe it's this one. Okay, so let me just double check that. Yep, that looks right. So I'll just type something like Brownfield register site and Brownfield register and PCL site for potentially contaminated land site. So that tells you straight away from here I can link over to my PCL site, which doesn't happen to have very much information in it, but I'll just put a bit of information in there just to make it interesting. But here you'd be able to see all the contaminated land officers information, the prioritization, site inspections, and so on and so forth. And the contaminated land officer would also be able to see that site that you've designated with outline permission for development, has been designated, and they'll be able to go in to the register and see the status of that particular planning permission. So that gives you a flavor of the sort of thing that the system's capable of. It's obviously I think one of the really good things about the system is that it's very, very flexible, and you can kind of tweak it to suit your own needs. So what we would then do is essentially once you've got all your data set up, we would create a program that will extract that data into a format that's required by DEFRA, so that it has the exact fields and the exact formats that are required by DEFRA. And we're still in the process of doing that, but that's something that's not a major thing to do. Once the information is in there, it's just a matter of extracting it. So so that will probably be in the form of a report or something where you'll be able to go here and say, give me my Brownfield register, and it will pull through all the sites with all the different fields. Okay. So at this juncture, what I'll do, I'll just open up the webinar for discussion. If anybody's got any questions or maybe got any observations they want to share, and we'll try and unmute everybody. So hopefully you've all got microphones. If you haven't, you can dial into the web conference on a phone and sort of participate there. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions. If you're a bit shy to talk or if you haven't got a microphone, you can also just type in a question. So I'm just muting. There's a bit of background noise there, so I'm just muting a couple of people there. I'm not seeing any questions coming through. Sorry, I can see there's one question there. So this is Anthony, who's one of our clients at the moment. As I understand, our planners are using the already completed SHLLA to produce the Brownfield register. I have some concerns. That's concern sites that don't meet the BF definition, such as colliery sites, may be included. Hoping to add Brownfield register sites, GIS and GeoEnviron when complete. Okay, I'm not familiar with the SHLLA, LAA. What could you maybe let us know what that is, Anthony? The strategic housing and availability assessment, right? Right. Yeah. I mean, I think there definitely needs to be some dialogue with the planners. It's been we've been trying to sort of this is the first Brownfield webinar that we've had so far, and we've been trying to get sort of some feedback from some of the authorities, and most of the feedback we've had so far is from contaminated land officers is nobody's contacted them. They haven't been involved at all in anything to do with the Brownfield register, which seems crazy to me. I mean, I don't know a lot about how planners are approaching this issue, but it seems like a no-brainer that you've got to start with the contaminated land officers, really, because even non-industrial brownfield sites are going to have potential issues that you would need to involve the contaminated land officer. So I've had to mute you all just because there's a bit of background noise there. But yes, feel free to raise your hand, and I can unmute you, or if you want to ask a question on the question forum there, that's fine as well. Okay, I think Sarah has got a question. So Sarah, I'm just going to try and unmute you here, and
Hi
hopefully,
Simon, can you hear me?
hi Sarah. Yes, you're coming through loud and
Hi,
clear.
jolly good. Yeah, we have the SHLA spreadsheet as well, and it was about 3-4 years ago we had that came round from planning as a request to look at about 500 sites,
Oh,
which we responded to, and then since then we've heard absolutely nothing, and we've had no recent correspondence either with planning over the register. So whether they're just looking at those sites that we responded to a long time ago, I don't know whether anyone else got contacted a while ago but hasn't been contacted recently, or if we should have been contacted recently, really.
yeah. I think that's it. I think it's kind of it's government, isn't it? It's the government that's sort of put this out there, but hasn't provided very much guidance in terms of what they would expect, how they would expect to see it implemented, and which is not a surprise because that's usually what happens. So I think it's going to be, I remember when Part 2A came out, and there was no dialogue between contaminated land, environmental health, and planning, and I remember literally, people have, I was an officer as well at that time, and sort of having to go to the planners and kind of explain to them, what contaminated land was, and why it was important that they consulted us, and so on. So this is probably kind of a little bit the same, really.
Sounds like it, I think, doesn't it? 'Cause, this is the first wave, I believe, isn't it? And then they'll be going again. Is that right?
That's right. So
Yeah.
so it's literally just been sort of enacted. So the requirement is for publishing the first version of the register this December. And even though it's just the first version, though, it's still an important version, I think. I'm guessing what's going to happen is, people will probably just, again, there's no guidance as to, the quality of what you publish, really. So whether you publish a spreadsheet that's got absolutely nothing on it, you're still publishing data. But this is where it goes back to, what's the objective? We're not just trying to tick a box. We're trying to, create, make it easier for developers to find land that's got permission in principle to develop, to create those houses that we need. And so it's kind of like, keeping the eye on the ball, really. So yeah, I suspect, I suspect it's going to be up to contaminated land officers to be proactive and kind of, raise their hands and sort of say, guys, we should be, if not leading this process, but we should be very involved in it, because it's going to land on your desk anyway, whichever way it goes. And I guess it's better to be prepared than sort of reacting to circumstances that are out of your control. Yeah.
Thanks, Simon.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Has anybody else got any comments or questions or suggestions? Okay, well, that's fine. I mean, but hopefully, the webinar's giving you an idea of the sorts of things you need to be thinking about. As I say, our system's available for those of you who haven't already got it. For those of you who have already got it, the idea of sort of expanding into planning, as I showed there, you've got the case management module, which would be a really good little module for your planners to maybe use, and then linking into your Part 2A module, and also into your planning module as well. So hopefully you can see how that all could tie in nicely. But we're on almost on the hour there. If there are no other questions, I think I will close the session. We're going to be running these sessions probably every couple of months or so, as there's this legislation kicks in, and hopefully we'll get some users on board. I am talking to some of our existing users at the moment about sort of rolling the system out to the planners, and hopefully we'll have some case studies and things to look at there in the next webinar. Oh, sorry, there is another question that has just come through. Can you post the reference for the DEFRA document, please? Yes, absolutely. We'll send you some follow-up from this webinar, and that will include some links to the DEFRA guidance. So yes, no problem at all. Well, thank you very much again, and please don't hesitate to get in touch with us if you have any questions, or if we're happy to come along to a meeting with your planners and sort of try and sort of show them the possibilities as well. So don't hesitate to let us know if that's of interest. Bye-bye.